Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I believe this is the last block of sessions of the Congress, so thank you for choosing to be here with us today. This is the thematic session on innovation ecosystems, catalyzing open innovation and economic growth. My name is Christopher Swope. I'm an American journalist, and I've been writing about innovation in cities for many years. Currently, I'm working with Bloomberg Philanthropies, writing stories about the 250 cities around the world that they have relationships with. You can find those stories by subscribing to our email newsletter. It's called Spark, and you can sign up at sparksubscribe.com. I wanted to start this session with a question, which is, what is this thing, open innovation? It's kind of a vague term, right? We may hear a few different ideas about that today. And I'll start just by offering one, and it's not really to define what open innovation is, but rather to suggest what it's not. We sometimes think that great ideas come from deep inside of us, that to think really big thoughts, we have to retreat to someplace peaceful, the forest or the beach, to do some really powerful, deep thinking on our own. You know, in the corporate context, this is sort of like what some companies do in their R&D shops. It's very internal. In city halls, it's often what happens when they're developing new policies and programs and they call in the experts to do it. It's innovation as an internal process, and it's closed. Open innovation is just the opposite. It's all about sharing, exchange, and partnership among all the different players who might be able to help solve a problem. In cities, that usually involves a municipality, of course, but it could also involve private companies, university researchers, NGOs, foundations, and most of all, it means people, the urban residents who these solutions are for. They have an enormous role to play in open innovation. This is actually terrain where the public sector may have the advantage, because if there's one thing that mayors love to do at events like this, it's to trade ideas with each other. In the public sector, there's no secrets. Mayors love to share. And what the best mayors know is that they can't solve every problem from inside City Hall, just with their own staffs and with taxpayer resources. Instead, they have to look outside to see who they can partner with to get things done. They need to use their power as a convener to bring people together from all different sectors to think creatively about how to overcome shared challenges. So how do you do that? We're going to hear lots of perspectives about that today. There's also lots of obstacles to overcome, and we'll hear about that as well. But as we start, I did want to share with you one program that Bloomberg Philanthropies has that I've had the pleasure of writing about for the last year or so. It's called the Mayor's Challenge. I know some of you may be familiar with it. It's where Michael Bloomberg puts up $9 million in prize money and asks mayors to put forward innovative ideas for solving urban problems. And they've done this 4 times now. In fact, Barcelona was a winner of this 4 years ago. And just a couple of weeks ago, the latest round of winners were announced. It's 9 cities in the United States with some really important ideas for how to solve homelessness, create energy efficiency, tackle some problems with juvenile justice, and more. And this year, the process that led to the final selection of those 9 cities was really interesting. There were 35 finalists in that competition, and each was given 6 months, $100,000, and a lot of coaching to take their ideas and prototype them with residents. And that may sound very basic to a lot of our friends here from the private sector who wouldn't dream of developing a product without prototyping and testing it out with the users. But it's very unusual for local authorities, particularly in the United States, to develop programs or policies this way. Historically, it's much more top-down. You know, we're the experts, we develop the solutions, we'll get some feedback, but it might be at a public hearing, kind of late in the process when it's a little late to influence it and not many people show up for the hearing. By contrast, in the Mayor's Challenge, you had city teams building prototypes of their ideas, testing out those prototypes with residents and building it together. And as a journalist covering the space for many years, you know, I've sometimes heard the word co-creation and not really known what that meant. And I have to say, in all honesty, this was the first time seeing what these 35 cities were doing. It's the first time I really got what the word co-creation meant. So that's just, I present that just as one example of open innovation in action. We're going to hear some more just now. Let me just briefly about the format of the program here. First, we're going to have a keynote presentation from Michelle Greenwald, who I'm going to introduce in a minute, and then we're going to have some dialogue here. I'll ask some questions. You can ask questions either through the app. You all know the Ask and Vote feature. You can do that. There's some microphones here if you want to do that. And then we're going to hear from Sergio Giorgi from the employment cooperative SMART, who's going to talk about the role of workers in innovation. And that will also be a dialogue with me and with you, so please, again, use the Ask and Vote feature in the app, and there's microphones here. Then we're going to take a short break. We'll have coffee in the back of the room, and then we'll reconvene at 4 o'clock for a panel discussion where we're going to hear more about how open innovation is actually happening on the ground in cities. And with that, let me introduce the first of our speakers, Michelle Greenwald. Michelle has held top positions at a number of Fortune 500 companies, including Disney and Pepsi, and now teaches marketing at New York University, the new Cornell Tech in New York, and I believe also you can talk about the business school here in Barcelona. And a lot of what she teaches is the power of observation, looking for even the smallest innovations everywhere around you and putting that knowledge to use. She does this with her firm Inventours, where she takes clients on trips to see some of the world's most creative cities, including Barcelona, to learn from innovators in the fields of technology, product design, and even cooking. Michelle writes a regular column for Forbes and revealed many of her secrets in a book called Catalysing Innovation. Please help me welcome Michelle Greenwald.
Hopefully this is on. Good, great. Okay, so I like to define terms like innovation and open innovation. They're used so commonly, but what do they really mean? So I always go to Wikipedia just to be sure what the Wikipedia definition is. And one of the first things that they stated is it's a mindset towards innovation to counter a secrecy and silo mentality. Companies and governments can't afford to rely entirely on their own research. They have to embrace external cooperation with customers, rivals, academic institutions, and communities of creative user innovators. And then lastly, to purposely manage knowledge flows across organizational boundaries. And I think this applies to cities. Open innovation applies to companies, it applies to cities, it applies to everybody. Okay, so what are the end goals of smart cities? I spoke at the conference in Buenos Aires last year, and almost the entire conference is about technology. But what's the end benefit of all this technology? It's to enable a better quality of life for residents, both from a personal standpoint and from a work standpoint, to attract businesses and talented individuals to cities. What we have now is more and more small cities are actually becoming competitive with larger cities because they're more affordable and they may have a great quality of life. So that's important. Improving the interaction between citizens and city government, and encouraging citizens to participate in co-creation and co-design of their own environments. So, types of open innovation, this is what I'm going to cover, and then I'm very visual. The name of my marketing consulting business is Marketing Visualized, so I'm going to show you examples of great practices that I find very inspiring around the world. So the first is citizen-generated ideas, or crowdsourcing, and a lot of these businesses are using them, but they're just as applicable to cities. Cross-sector innovation hubs, open data and transparency, city government branch-sponsored contests, hackathons, big business collaboration, and then my book, Catalysing Innovation, the goal is to encourage every organization, every person to think more broadly about all the different ways that they can innovate, because people tend to do the same thing over and over again. It was inspired by Ferran Adrià, the chef from El Bulli, who's considered the most creative chef who ever lived, and his principles now are being used for Barça, the soccer team in Barcelona. It's being used by Grifols, which is a healthcare company, to do hematology research. It's directly applicable to everything. Okay, so who can do open innovation? City governments, individual citizens, cultural institutions, local neighborhoods and communities, large corporations, small businesses, and NGOs. So if you like, check out, I've done a TEDx talk about this. I've done a podcast interview about innovation if you want to hear about a little bit more about it. And one of the things that I'm very impressed with, and Barcelona, to me, nobody does it better than Barcelona. It's Barcelona Tech City. But there's this new wave of innovation hubs that I've found in many different cities. So I'm just going to share with you. And this is where you have together, you have government, you have VC firms, you have startups, you have large corporations, you have academia, all working together in one environment, benefiting from knowledge flows, et cetera. Okay, other ones that are really noteworthy are Station F in Paris. In Buenos Aires, there's an area it's very interesting because many of these startup hubs are happening where there were abandoned warehouses. So there was relatively affordable real estate, and these buildings have been gutted in many cases, and now all of a sudden there are these amazing innovation hubs. So in a very desolate area of Buenos Aires that didn't have good transportation connection, they put in subways, they put in bike sharing, and you can see here who's located in this Buenos Aires technical district. You have from all over the world. You have Huawei from China, Nokia from Finland, Tata from India, something like 4 or 5 of the last 6 startups, last 6 unicorns in South America came out of Argentina. And in spite of some of their political problems, they've got a very creative population, and they've been fostering innovation. It's also near the Institute of Technology of Buenos Aires and the Design Center. So you can see the cross-pollination of thinking in one very creative sector. Okay, another one, let me see, okay, let me go back. This is in the Brooklyn Naval Yard. Brooklyn, where I live, has become an amazing hub. And there are a number of really interesting multi-sector innovation hubs. This one is called Brooklyn Naval Yard. They used to build ships there. And now you have one of the top film schools in America located there. You have light manufacturing. You have beer companies. There's the largest urban rooftop farm in the world. It's a commercial farm on a rooftop on 2.5 acres. There's a rooftop vineyard. There's a whiskey distillery. So you have all these really interesting creative people together kind of having a good time and stimulating each other. Okay. And then MIT Media Lab, which maybe was the early pioneer in all of this, is another very notable place. So much creativity is coming out of MIT Media Lab, and there are a lot of corporate sponsors for it, and the corporate sponsors have first right of investment in a lot of these startups. But you can see the disciplines, neurobiology, emotive computing, bionics, all these different really brilliant people are coming together, and their genius is rubbing off on each other. Okay, another one is the Ukraine. One of my students is in charge of real estate for Snapchat, and Snapchat just located in the Ukraine in this unit city. It's an amazing innovation hub. It's massive. There's a lot of very good talent there, very affordable talent, and almost every sector of technology is represented. Okay, and then in Taiwan, I was in Taiwan last year, ITRI, which is a research institute, and they have brilliant people, scientists, academicians, and they're pairing them up with business people to help them figure out how to monetize their ideas and market them globally. Okay, another area that's very, very prevalent is open data. Almost every city is doing open data programs, and it's enabling startups to have data to analyze, it's a win-win. And then there are these challenges. So this is New York City. They have an open data project. They have contests, and it's really a double benefit because the cities get great ideas, and the citizens become very empowered, and they have an opportunity to monetize and bring their ideas to life. Okay, and these are just examples of the open data hackathon. So this is another thing. Mount Sinai Medical School is the most innovative healthcare institution in New York. You might think it's Columbia or NYU or Cornell, but it's Mount Sinai, partly because they brought Silicon Valley thinking to the healthcare sector, and they routinely run hackathons on different topics. But this is an area that governments are doing now. City governments are running hackathons. And then corporations soliciting ideas and multi-participant task force. So if you look at Unilever, which is like a $60 billion company, it's massive, they have an open innovation portal. And they publicize to the world what types of innovations they're looking for. this is an example of looking for sustainable water, and look who they have involved. The Indian National Institute of Design, Environmental Engineering and Research Institute, Ernst & Young, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, et cetera, et cetera. So they're really getting the best minds to work together to collaborate. And then Procter & Gamble, another huge multinational also. They have an innovation portal. In the old days, companies were afraid to get ideas from outside. But now they know if they don't do that, they just can't scale, they can't come up with the ideas fast enough, they have to collaborate. And so most of these companies now have open innovation departments, and they go around scouting the world for innovations, for acquisitions, for partnerships. Okay, so these are their lists. So each of them, if you want to go to the websites, you can click and see what they're looking for. Okay, transparency, making city activities and spending known to the citizenry, and encouraging citizens to influence selection of programs that governments work on. So actually I've taken 2 innovation trips to Sant Cugat. Sant Cugat is the smartest city, I believe, in Spain. I think it's fair to say that. And they're doing amazing things in many ways, but the website is extremely transparent. Citizens vote on what programs the government supports, and then they publicize the results, and they publicize the budget, so citizens can actually make the government more responsible and see what's going on. Yesterday, I'm on the Digital Future Society on the Board of Trustees of a new initiative being started by Mobile World Capital Barcelona, and one of the board members is the Chief Digital Officer for Taiwan, and it was fascinating. She remotely gave a presentation yesterday here, and instead of seeing her on a computer screen, it was a hologram. She was being broadcast from Taiwan by a hologram, and what she was talking about was the simple but ingenious system that Taiwan uses to crowdsource its laws. And they're really being a pioneer in this area. So if you want to read that article, it's from the MIT Technology Review. Okay, another thing that's going on is there's a lot of education, free or very inexpensive education for citizenry to empower them to be contributors to cities. Fablabs, which was started at MIT, they've launched one at Asade Creopolis last year, and it's really being launched all over the world. And for those of you that don't know, it's 3D printers and laser cutters and all kinds of machinery so that anybody can come and turn their idea into a reality. When I went to Asade Creopolis, they said that the first person waiting the day that they opened was a 15-year-old who wanted to come and make a drone. So this is very exciting that, young people I find fearless, and it's really encouraging people to realize their dreams and do it themselves. And then my book is Catalysing Innovation. I came up with a checklist. I went around the world taking pictures of anything that I had never seen in an industry before. And this is, again, based on the way Ferran Adria innovates, but I came up with 63 different types of innovation. So there's business model innovation, process innovation, price point innovation, materials innovation. There are complicated technology, very expensive things that you can do, but you can also innovate in very inexpensive and simple ways. So these are just things, when I spoke in Buenos Aires, I was looking at what citizens had done to empower themselves to improve their environments. And these are some of my favorite examples. This is a small shipping company in Madrid, and they have collaborated with street artists who were literally in the street doing art. And they've taken their art and they've decorated trucks throughout Spain. So they're beautiful works of art, and it's, really respecting street artists. This is, just another rest of my chapters. But if you look at simple things like color innovation, in Dublin, which I was in about 2 years ago, everybody paints their door a different color. And this has been the visual icon of the city. People come and they take pictures, and it's, very inexpensive, and it gives the city a personality. Okay, citizen government brand sponsored empowerment. So really, this is what I love. I'm going to illustrate very inexpensive ways that you can have open innovation in cities. Just through paint, flowers, cement, bent metal, game boards, and reclaimed materials. Okay, so One of my favorite examples, Brooklyn, many parts of Brooklyn are very depressed. They have a dangerous reputation. But the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens has created a contest for the greenest block in Brooklyn, and now every block is trying to make their block more beautiful than the next, and it's wonderful, and it's fun to walk around, and it's made the city safer. Okay, another example, this is the New York City Department of Transportation. They have an urban art program in conjunction with Fashion Institute of Technology, and they've encouraged art students to paint all these dividers. And this is making the ordinary special. This is one of my favorite parts of innovation, when you take something that's ugly and all of a sudden you start painting it, and it makes people smile and feel creative. Okay, I teach at Cornell in Ithaca, New York, and in Ithaca, all the traffic light boxes have been painted. And it's really fun to walk around the city, and you don't have to be a famous artist to see your work every day in the street. And then this is one in Montreal, Canada, where block by block, houses that have alleys behind them have turned their alleys into little mini parks, little community areas. Little kids can go on tricycles, etc. So that's a nice one. This is my favorite example of all. This is an area in Indonesia that was like a favela, extremely poor and very sad. And they spent $22,000 in paint. Okay, and they painted the entire city, okay? So every house, people painted it as beautifully as they could. This was the before, and this is the after. Okay? So, these are just some more examples, but it says the project encourages the active involvement of citizens in the improvement of their homes. That's become an Instagram sensation. Now it's a destination. People are going there just to take pictures. I don't know if you know this, but young people, millennials, when they travel, their research is on Instagram. So Instagram has become incredibly powerful in the travel industry, and it really has changed this town. They're now selling food, they're now selling souvenirs, and it's dramatically improved the economy with a very low investment. So the future is bright and beautiful, thanks to the amazing power of art. So basically, what I believe, and this is what I do with companies. I'm doing a program with 50 companies in January where I train them to observe innovation around them every day. It changes the way you view the world. But if you're a city government, you need to tell the citizens what you want them to look for. And now with hashtags and Slack and all these tools, Instagram, whatever, people can collect inspiring examples for the city when they want to brainstorm. So with smartphones and categorization, you can use these types of innovation to create an innovation mindset in cities and in companies. Okay, so basically, I think you can use mine as inspiration, but cities can create their own based on what's important to them. And again, using all these different tools, you can organize the information so it doesn't go into a black hole. When you want to innovate on color or customer engagement or merchandising or whatever it is, presentation, you can go and see all the ideas that the citizens have come up with. And it makes life more fun for them and a positive outlook of looking for the good in the world and not looking for always the government to wait till they give to me. Okay? So what needs to happen for this to happen? I believe that support for empowering citizenry and these initiatives needs to come from the top. Lee Kuan Yew, who was really the father of modern-day Singapore, loved flowers. And I know Singapore just won an award at the conference. If you go to New York and drive into Manhattan, you probably wonder what's so great about New York. It's so ugly. Singapore, they made beautiful flowers everywhere, and the name of the city is City in a Garden. So, that's a beautiful thing, but it came from the top. So what I propose for cities is they create a new position of Chief Innovation Finder and Curation Officer, and the job description is to communicate initiatives to help city departments and citizens find the types of innovation that that city wants to improve on, and then organize and share those innovations as catalysts for brainstorming initiatives. Okay, so these are just simple steps and then I'm done. Set objectives and communicate priority and government support. decide which groups. Is it the Parks Department? Is it the Library Department? Is it the Transportation Department? Which ones are going to create these initiatives? And then communicate the types of innovation you're looking for. Okay, communicate it to the citizens. And now, with social media, with Instagram, you can make your city websites a whole lot more fun. I'm sure everybody has an opportunity to do that. Share those initiatives so that everybody is aware. And then benchmark other cities globally. There's a contest here within the Smart Cities Conference, and you should be looking at the websites of who's winning different types of initiatives for inspiration. And then create mood boards. When you want to innovate in a certain area, what are people doing around the world in that particular area? So with that, share successes and share metrics. So I think, am I out of time? Okay, all right, that's it. Thank you. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay.
That was great. Lots of concrete ideas there. I love having lots of concrete ideas. And I'm going to ask a few questions, but please do use the Ask and Vote app or come up and use a microphone. But I want to start, you've taken so much inspiration from food.
Yes.
And I know Ferran Adria is like one of your heroes.
Yes.
So, and I think you were going to spend some time with him this week. So like,
I did.
Could you just talk a little bit, just before we dive into some of the wonkier stuff here, like why do you find food and innovation around cooking to be so inspirational for what innovators in the public and private sector can?
Because believe it or not, so Ferran, his restaurant was 5 times #1 in the world. He's very systematic, amazingly so. He's very methodical. He's very good at iterating. He's very good at documenting and tracking the evolution of things. All the things he's doing really are things that companies like Google and Apple are doing, which is lots of little mini experiments, failing early, failing fast, and thinking like just about all the different ways you can innovate. So I work for large multinationals, and for years we do brainstorming sessions, and we just do the same ideas over and over again because we didn't have a checklist. Thomas Edison, who I thought just happened to invent the light bulb, was really a methodical innovator. He had an innovation factory. And my favorite quote from Thomas Edison is that to invent, you need a good imagination and a pile of junk or stimuli. People need stimuli. And what Ferran did was he closed his restaurant 6 months a year. Most businesses can't afford to do this. But he sent his team around the world looking at different ingredients, processes, equipment, and he'd bring new ideas into the kitchen from other industries that nobody had ever seen before. But if he didn't send them around looking at other countries and looking at other sectors, he wouldn't have been able to bring those ideas in. My favorite chapter in my book is one called Analogies. And if you look at Phil Knight, who is a partner in Nike, created I don't know if you know the Nike waffle trainer sneaker. And he was inspired by his wife's waffle iron. And it was just like a eureka moment. The head of innovation for Subway went on my trip to Copenhagen, and he had a sandwich idea by seeing a parking lot from Bjarke Ingels, he's one of the most famous architects in the world. He's building the Googleplex right now in San Francisco. But he got an idea for sandwich layers just by looking at a parking lot. People sometimes feel guilty if they're not doing the day-to-day. Going on a trip and just like observing can give you so many ideas, but you sometimes need to step back. And so I believe in learning how to look for innovation and collecting innovations. I walk around with a little book, and every time I see something innovative, like the tech people here there's a company called F1, and I saw them in the hotel. And I said, what does F1 mean? I thought it was Formula One racing. They said, no, there's the F1 key on the computer when you need help. So they came up with that as the name, and I have a chapter on name innovation. So it just like looking around you every day and collecting ideas and saving them, because otherwise they go in your mind and out, and you can't find them later when you want and need them.
So it's not all holograms. I mean, I think we're all impressed by the idea of this person kind of virtually showing up, but I think that's one of your key messages is that it doesn't have to be high-tech stuff. Innovation is not equal technology.
Correct. Innovation can be, I have a chapter on reversing things or changing the orientation. Turning a ketchup bottle upside down is very simple and it's innovative. because you have more face panel on the package, it squeezes out more, and that's simply turning something upside down. Ralph Lauren changed the size. I have a chapter on size innovation. The size of the logo on the Ralph Lauren shirt, and he created a whole new fashion and a whole new line. So there are lots of things. That's why I like to show these examples, that it doesn't have to be fabulously complex. It doesn't have to be incredibly technical. You can innovate in big ways and little ways.
Yeah. So imagine you're like a mayor, you've just been elected to office, and you want to create a more innovative culture in your city.
Yes.
Where do you start? I mean, you had some of this, but like,
Yeah.
Where do you start to make that change?
Well, I love the idea of encouraging people to submit ideas. And that's something I think Sankugat is doing. I think Taiwan is doing that. And then having people vote. This is becoming, crowdsourcing is becoming a huge, huge deal in product development. Lego has a program where it's called Lego Ideas. And every quarter, people submit ideas to Lego. And if you can get friends and family to vote, 10,000 votes, then they will review it and then maybe decide to make the product. Really now, Pepsi, so many companies are encouraging citizens to give them feedback. Xiaomi, which is a huge Chinese telecommunications company, they make handsets, and they update almost every week. They change their software based on feedback from consumers. So the idea of encouraging people to submit ideas, having a way for them to get feedback, and for consumers to vote and pick what they're most excited about, I think it's a virtuous cycle.
What I love about the 63 different ways that innovation happens is that in a way, it makes it seem tactile and real, and I don't want to say easy, but it feels manageable, right?
Yes.
But we all know it's difficult too. So what are the sort of hurdles that you see either in the corporate sector or the public sector? Kind of what are those barriers that leaders often kind of bump up into when they're trying to innovate?
Well, I think that nobody knows who the decision maker is. I find that within city governments, it's similar problems to companies. The companies, if you look at that, have been most successful, sort of have a dictator as the leader. If you look at Jeff Bezos, I don't know if dictator's the right word, but Jack Ma, Steve Jobs, all these people, they have huge, tremendous visions. They're able to rally everybody around them, and they listen, but really they lead the charge. And so that's why I had Lee Kuan Yew up here, because I think senior management needs to set priorities. If the government knows that senior management, meaning the mayor, is really behind this, then they know what the priorities are, and then things happen. But if every department is either fighting or they don't know who the decision maker is, then things keep floundering. And as you can see, I find there's a lot of theoretical discussion at all of these meetings. You come up with all discussion of theory and emotions and whatever, but you need to really make things concrete and visual. What does this mean for me?
And I'll remind you, if you have any questions, feel free to ask either through the app or on the microphone. I'm interested in this question of sort of who owns innovation, right? So you proposed, I think it's the chief innovation finder, or what?
Yeah, a curation officer.
Curation officer. Yeah. But at the same time, you also talk about innovation being something that every employee of the organization can have a role in.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. So who is responsible for creating innovation in an enterprise?
Well, I think many organizations now, the latest title is, besides Chief Listening Officer, of listening to what consumers are saying on Twitter about everything, but Chief Disruption Officers, Chief Innovation Officers. And their job is to make sure that everybody is innovating in different ways. It's also to scout for acquisitions, technology, licensing, that type of thing. But it's also to come up with these kinds of programs to empower citizens to innovate. So I think it's the role of that person to put these programs in place and convince whoever needs to support it to make it happen.
Another obstacle I sometimes hear about is I mean, I said the public sector, there's no secrets, but obviously in the private sector, lots of secrets.
Yeah.
So where does, when you're talking about collaborations, this is open innovation is often the public sector and the private sector trying to solve a problem together. Does intellectual property, should that be a concern, or like how would?
It can be a concern, and that's frankly, intellectual property concerns has kept, I think for a long time, made open innovation not happen. But I think now the fear of not moving fast enough is stronger than the fear of someone stealing your idea. And I don't know in all cases how it's documented, where the idea came from, who it's owed to, but there's such a fear now because things are happening so fast. The new product development cycle is happening faster and faster, that if you don't innovate and collaborate and have open innovation, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah. Well, I'll just have one last question. I don't see any in the app, so I love the term Instagrammability.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think you're the first one to tell me that. Maybe
Yes.
maybe that's out there. I've just missed it. But I mean, the notion of Instagrammability being kind of a defining characteristic of our time.
Yes.
Of how you break through the clutter. So
Yes.
any further? I mean, what they did with the paint in that one village is amazing.
Right.
Any other secrets to becoming an Instagrammable city?
Yeah, well, what's interesting, I have reverse mentors. So I have like college students, graduate students who mentor me. They keep me up to date on technology. And one of the things I find fascinating, which I mentioned, is how young people travel. They don't look at the Guardian travel section, the New York Times travel section, Photo or TripAdvisor. They go to Instagram. They may go to those other sources to see the idealized version, but they don't believe it. So they go to Instagram to see what these places really look like. And in particular in restaurants, the Culinary Institute of America is the best, most famous cooking school in America, and they have a course now on training chefs how to make their food Instagrammable. And this is something with decor. Department stores are having a very difficult time fighting against e-commerce. My reverse mentor works for Macy's, and they have come up with Instagrammable Christmas things that you want to take a picture and send to your family. Right now, Pepsi-Cola has football, you know what American football is like, big deal in the US. Pepsi has on the streets of Chicago giant football helmets of different teams, and people stick their head in it just to take a picture and send it with the Pepsi name on it. So every marketing company now, a lot of their marketing is to figure out what they can do to make their brand Instagrammable. And I'll just say one last thing. I was in New Zealand with the president of 2 companies, and I was amazed that the president of 2 companies were talking about the Instagrammability of their marketing programs. So I think it's everywhere.
And that's, of course, a shameless plug for you all to tell all the things that you're learning on Instagram. Michelle, thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
Is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to invite to the stage Sergio Giorgi. Come on up, Sergio. Sergio is going to talk about how workers fit into this innovation ecosystem discussion and an interesting new approach to facilitating that. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Sergio, just brief introduction. Sergio leads international development at SMART, which is a cooperative that supports 100,000 workers in 9 European countries. I think we might have a map of where they are in a minute. It's a fascinating organization that started out 20 years ago to help artists navigate the booms and busts of work, where they could have a lot of income one month and maybe none the next. And that model has actually proven to be quite relevant and adaptable in this kind of new economic context where so many jobs are freelance jobs, or if you want to be an entrepreneur, there's obviously lots of risks and instability in that. With that, we're going to just have a dialogue about what SMART is and how it works and why this is so relevant to the conversation about open innovation. So, Sergio, could you tell me a little bit more about SMART?
Sure. Well, first of all, SMART started 20 years ago in Belgium, and we didn't realize it at that time that it might become so spread as a term, right? SMART. There was at those times neither a car nor fancy mobile phones or televisions or even cities that had that name. The original term actually starts as Société Mutuelle pour les Artistes. So the art in SMART really stands for artists, which were the original public we addressed to. And Société Mutuelle, of course, standard also to indicate the model on which we relied. We like to call ourselves as a shared model of company, a kind of company where our members are entrepreneurs but do not own on an individual basis the assets or the equipment that most of the traditional models of enterprise would usually do. So yeah, at that time artists were actually faced with extremely fragmented patterns of work. And in Belgium, they had to comply with a number of requirements in order to abide to fiscal, administrative, legal, security norms. And the idea came up. Originally, was a rock and roll band producer and a nuclear engineer who came together and sort of started this platform where people could sort of automatically record the characteristics of their jobs they would do for clients and have the platform dealing with all the complexity. So I like to recall a kind of slogan our partners in Italy put up, which goes, a voi l'arte, a noi le carte, which is, you deal with the art, we deal with the paperwork. And that was to intend that so that our members could really focus on the main scope of their work.
Mm-hmm. And the artists would actually become employees of Smart, correct?
Correct. Yes, exactly.
So how does that work?
Well, basically, artists would become employees, and actually we changed into being a cooperative 3 years ago, and actually they would be at the same time shareholders of the cooperative, having a right to vote and to take part to decision-making bodies, participating into working groups to sort of co-design the offering services, and at the same time they would be employees of the cooperative.
So they'd get a commission from somewhere, and then that would be where they're paid, but then Smart is actually kind of their backbone and their support system.
Exactly. So usually, so they would find their client, right? And they would use Smart to get all the support services a normal company would need. Like you start a company, you would probably need a bookkeeper, maybe an accountant, a VAT number, maybe an office space and equipment, and all that you can find through Smart using, we're all using the same VAT number. And of course, the secret is through mutualization, we can make services that would otherwise be just unaffordable for small entrepreneurs to get access to.
Interesting. So you start with artists 20 years ago, and this model has evolved and become maybe even more relevant and more applicable to the nature of work in our current times. Can you talk about how that's happened?
Yeah. Well, a lot of things that happened during these 20 years happened while we were doing things. I mean, I have to acknowledge that just as we started with that name without knowing that it would become so, spread in our society, we also started with artists. And artists actually, it's a kind of profession where many are called, but few succeed. So maybe today I'm a musician, I'm a guitar player, maybe I have a gig this weekend, but during the week maybe I would work as a teacher and give classes, and maybe I would put up a gig and a tour, an international tour the month after. So all these ways of different modalities of work, different modalities of collaboration, different spread in time and in space, were originally characteristics that were really owned by artists, but that actually spread throughout a number of other professions. So yes, indeed, today artists still remain an important share of our public, of our members, but more than half of our turnover is made up by professionals who come from IT sector, then we say artists, but there's all the creative professions, translators, we have gardeners, we have, a huge number of professions that take advantage of our services.
Any interesting examples of how this has played out for your members?
Yes, well, actually, as may have not mentioned yet, we're now in 9 European EU countries, and that international dimension has opened up for opportunities for our members to put up transnational projects. So in the creative sector, we typically would have circuses or music professionals. Other nice examples I find are those the experience we've had with a platform worker. Maybe I haven't insisted enough on how it is how it is important for us to secure security conditions for workers who work on an intermittent basis.
Yes.
And protection of workers is really something which is important to us in both physical terms but also financial terms, so that people can rely on smoothed incomes and also can rely on safety nets that pay up for the periods where they don't find an occupation, they might need training for that moment, or they just might become sick and out of a job. So by doing this, for instance, one of the interesting cases we had was to see our services used by platform workers who were bicycling and being paid by a platform that was called Deliveroo at that time. And by the time we realized we had about 1,000 workers working for this platform, delivering food left and right in the cities, we found ourselves in a position where we went to see the client and say, all right, this in there, it's actually a work that is being paid for as a service, and we need to come and discuss together for minimum working conditions, because these people didn't have helmet, didn't have security equipment, they didn't have minimum working hours. So together with the unions, we managed to really make a difference at those times in between the workers who were working through our services for the platform and the other ones. And well, eventually the story goes like the platform went bankrupt because the investors of the platform pulled out as they saw that revenues were decreasing. And we actually, our cooperative as an employer, found itself in a position where we had to mobilize our guarantee fund and pay out the salary for the workers, okay?
Interesting. So that it's sort of what's interesting about this model is that it's for freelancers or gig economy employees it can work, but it's also let's talk about entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs are sort of a special beast, and we celebrate them often in our culture of the brilliant people with great ideas, and they go on to found unicorn companies and become trillionaires. So that's not always the case, obviously, but let's talk a little bit about how this model works for entrepreneurs, because that's really an important part of what we're talking about and cities trying to build innovation ecosystems.
Yeah. So indeed, I think today our cooperative groups in the 9 countries employs or has provided services to up to 100,000 people. And I would say the characteristic of these people, besides being freelancers, is also the point of the fact that they are geared by a motivation which doesn't put profit as the only priority. I think they look into models where they can get access to through forms of solidarity, to secure environments, through more collaborative ways of working, and find through our cooperative an identity despite the utter atomization of the working pattern.
And to talk about why does this model matter to innovation in the cities? We're trying to create more innovative cities. How does this help us get there?
Well, I think you see, innovation is being throughout our society, and whether we're moving into forms of transitions towards less pollution, towards more efficient energy, more whatever, all this eventually requires work. I mean, and I think this is where smart has a nice value to bring in. It is because it really takes care of everything that happens after the light bulb has been illuminating, an idea has come out, and innovation can start through work. So innovation can start, failure may happen, but we have means through our cooperative to alleviate the consequences of failure, smoothing revenues, securing protection for workers, and also enhancing collaboration.
So innovation's not always just ideas. There's also people that have to bring those ideas into fruition.
Absolutely.
Last question, just kind of looking to the future, and we'll have a break in a minute. Where do you see this growing?
Well, we are receiving an increasing number of demands to replicate our model, and I think actually my boss wrote a book a couple of years ago whose title is Reinventing the World, and then 3 dots and say of work. Okay. And I think we see ourselves developing our model in a number of other countries, whether of the EU or outside the EU, because we really believe in the fact that our model can bring a change, a positive change in the way enterprises operate, work is done, and in the way society works. And in terms of, let's say, medium, short-term goals, we would like to come up with a proposal by 2020, is actually a couple of years ahead, for a European status of freelance workers. Meaning,
what is that?
Well, you see, European Union is an organization where areas of competences have been defined through treaties, where each government has been devoting competence to the European Union. And that has been taking place in a number of areas, right? Historically, it started with charcoal, steel, atomic energy, then we had agriculture, and this is why we have a European standard for cucumbers, right? It's because we've devoted to the European Union the ability to make legislation in agriculture area.
But there's no standard for freelance work.
There's no standard for social protection. There's no, and this is the kind of movement we would like to bring in, so as to enforce minimum standards and enforce social protection.
Because it could be a little different from country to country.
It currently actually is. Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sergio, thank you so much for taking the time to share this with us.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. If we could all get back on our seats. And while you're doing that, I'll introduce a moderator for our next panel. That's Hila Oren, who leads the Tel Aviv Foundation in Israel, which works closely with the city of Tel Aviv to connect donors around the world to help the city's work in key priority areas. And urban innovation really is her passion. She's the one who really shaped Tel Aviv's identity as the startup city for the startup nation. And I can tell you, in just a half an hour I spent with her yesterday at the Tel Aviv booth, I can totally see why that strategy has been such a success, because like within minutes she had me connected with like a dozen people who had started up companies and the public sector people who were participating in it, and clearly everybody in Tel Aviv is rowing the boat in the same direction, and Hila is a big part of why that's happening. So with that, I'll turn it over to Hila. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And actually, I appreciate it so much that you're still here with us at 4 p.m. In the event. We will have now, in our next hour, 10 minutes, I'll share with you a little trip to Tel Aviv, and then we'll call on our 3 panel participants. So let's start. Can we close the door? Sorry? Oh. Before I start, I'd like to thank FIRA for inviting me here for the 6th year, to Pilar and Hugo, and for Chris to moderate this. And the time that we had yesterday actually was very interesting for me. I define myself as a city maker, not a shoemaker, not a filmmaker, but a city maker. I think it's a new profession for startup and smart cities. We'll go into that a little bit later, and I'll explain why. I'm a mother of 3, 25-year-old, 23, and a 9-year-old. And in a way, to look at a city through that perspective is very interesting. Now, Tel Aviv, when we just started, we pointed our vision to be one of the 20 leading global cities. Now, of course, we're not tier 1, but still, how are you perceived as part of New York, Tokyo, London, and Paris? You actually have to understand the DNA of your city to define that USP, the unique selling point that Tel Aviv has and no other city has. Now, I'll tell you, we actually tried to find it. In the beginning, we weren't sure what that was until we went over to New York and we consulted with Michael Bloomberg, the mayor of New York, and he told us, guys, you didn't do your homework well. Go back home and understand that you are actually the startup city. Exactly at that, this picture where you see here, where all the sand is and the 66 families, the founders, 109 years ago, exactly at that place, if you'll come today back to Tel Aviv, to Rothschild Boulevard. Actually, how many people here have been to Tel Aviv? Oh, okay, we have like 15% without really counting. So if you come to Rothschild Boulevard and you knock on every door, most of the doors over there will be of startups. Now, I'm pointing that out because this is the DNA of the city. But when you want to understand how do you create a DNA, the creative class, as Professor Richard Freud had termed it, has 3 T's which you want to attract into your city. You want to attract the talent, and this is how the escalator, the entrance to the city hall is, and this is just an example, and it is changing every time. You want to make sure that technology is really accessible, and when we put city-wide free Wi-Fi throughout all the city, now it's quite regular in a lot of cities, but when we did it in 2012, it was actually quite unique, and when I went 2 years ago to Sydney, Australia, it was still not there. I mean, you didn't have Wi-Fi in the streets, and in my hotel I had to pay for it, which was quite, and that was just 2 years ago. Another thing for that to understand, the most rated Wi-Fi in the city is in the south area where all the illegal workers are. And this is another way of looking at things at a smart city. How are you providing data accessible to knowledge and to other resources? And the last T, the tolerance. Tel Aviv is quite, although some of you may not have that in mind, but Tel Aviv is a very, very tolerant city, especially to the gay, lesbian community. Well, it's the Israel's business center, and this is how the Google offices are looking. This is ranked one of the top 25 financial centers. Again, Tel Aviv, you wouldn't perceive it as one of the 20 leading cities, but it is because of the startup ecosystem, which has actually a big spillover now, with more startups per capita than even any other city except for San Francisco. After having that little introduction into the startup thing, what is it that makes it such an innovative city, such an open data? It's all about the way we see it. It's all about city making. Now, what you see here is the duck on the roof of the municipality. His leg is just on the office of the mayor. And that duck was introduced by a community of illustrators, and they insisted on putting the duck on the roof. Now, why? I don't think it's really important. But when you have a community, for them it meant a lot. But when you have a community that is part of the city and wants to feel that the city is theirs, give them the opportunity to feel that is. Take off red tapes. Don't explain why not, because this is what we usually do. And when they came and approached me, the first answer I wanted to say, well, I'm not sure. And then I closed my mouth and I said, I'll talk to you tomorrow. That was the best thing I could do. And tomorrow I understood that I have to say, yes, let's find a way. And if you ask me how to define a smart city, rule number 1 is please don't say no. Take off red tapes, put on the red carpet, and think how you can make collaborations. So this is part of why I think I'm a city maker, and this is my responsibility as a civil servant. Another example is the library we opened in 2011, again, when we were at a trip in New York, and we just understood that co-working space are the way to open data. At the time, there was no WeWork. There were no co-working spaces all over the world. It was only New York and San Francisco and Tel Aviv. Where did we open it? In a library, in a neglected area, neglected place, in Rothschild Boulevard. No one went there, had the best view. It took me a while to convince the librarians to give half of the property for an innovation that they didn't understand. It was big fights. Today we're best friends, and you know what happened? The amount of subscribers had doubled. So innovation is an epidemic. It touches. And this is part, I'm inviting you, if you're in Tel Aviv, to come and jump to the library. You won't believe what's happening there. We understood that just to drop innovation and ecosystem and to drop these terms is not enough. We really have to have a work plan, how the startup city went global. As I said, the free Wi-Fi, startup city studies. We reduced city taxes, which were very important. We had startups in south of Tel Aviv. We had a committee that is inviting startups to try the municipality as their beta site, and so on and so on. Again, you're invited to Tel Aviv booth to learn that, but every city has to tie its own how would I say, program, and the program of Tel Aviv will not look like the program of Helsinki or the program of Shanghai, but what it will look is listening to the residents and understanding what they need and how are we allowing technology to meet there. So 2014, again, I was lucky enough to subscribe to the City Award, and you won't believe it, we won. Now, why did we win on 2014 the award as Smart City? Because of our digital, because of our card that is actually doing engagement with residents. I do encourage you to go online later on and understand what that card for citizens does. The interesting thing about it is because Israelis and Tel Avivians are not so afraid about privacy, it got such a high amount of subscribers that then we started doing DigiDog, which are cards for dogs, and they really got top ratings, and DigiTaf, which are for small kids. That means we're pushing information to each card, to each resident, to its own needs. If you live in a specific city and your road is going to be blocked, then you need that information, but all the rest of the citizens don't need it, etc. This is, again, a tool that helps a smart city, but the definition, the way I see it, is listening to what the citizens need. How do you listen to them? Technology is great, but not only technology. Also roundtables, also social media, also meetings. Don't forget, if you have here civil servants around this room, open your room, make it transparent, listen to them. Usually, they know better than us. I'm a civil servant for 20 years. Most of my best ideas I get from my colleagues, from my citizens. Now, I know how bothering it is. I know that at the end of the day, you don't feel like hearing new ideas, but this is the way. This is, at least for me, this is smart city. In the last 3 years, I went another step and joined the Tel Aviv Foundation as CEO, and the Tel Aviv Foundation is actually a tool for bringing resources into town, because we all talk about tools, but did we think how are we going to finance them? And city budget is always limited, always. If you'll just go to city budget, always your accountant will tell you you don't have enough. So if your mission is to really have cutting edge urban philanthropy, that means define exactly what are your city game changers, how are you adding value to your cities, and most of the global cities have problems like asylum seekers. At least in Tel Aviv, 10% of our population is asylum seekers. They're transparent. We don't have budget for them, but they bring one of the biggest problems to the lowest poverty neighborhoods. How are we solving that? It's not only about lighting and transportation and infrastructure. We like talking about that because this is where the big money is, but the social problems are actually them, and this is a smart city that knows how to define that. What are those new financial tools? Crowdfunding. You won't believe it, but it really helps. And when the city declares that it matches every dollar that citizens bring or other organizations bring, crowdfunding is a way to fund specific things. CityCoin is another brilliant idea of taking the cost of living. I do encourage you to go into Kolu and look it up. It's in Tel Aviv, it's in Liverpool, and I think, personally, in 5 years from now, each city is going to have a CityCoin. Just about 6-7 years ago, we never believed that our phones that we're holding here will give us such a good service as a camera, as a navigator, as a bank, as a telephone, as so many things. I think CityCoin is one of the next things. And of course, PPP, we talk about it, but do we really use it? Do we really do collaboration? It's still a question. I think smart cities must insist on that. Social bonds, the last tool that I want to elaborate on. Loneliness for elderly people is one of the biggest problems in all the cities. We're now initiating a new social bond on loneliness for elderly. We're making a program that we're showing how through that program we're actually saving money for the government and for the city, and we're bringing investors, impact investors, to invest on that. So all these financial tools are great. There are some urban foundations I'm sure you're aware of, but if not, just to know, the Bernard Van Leer Foundation with Urban 95 is funding cities to develop and plan through 95 centimeters. How does a city look through It's brilliant, and it's new, and it brings different thoughts. Rockefeller Foundation with their resilient cities and their CROs, and of course Bloomberg Philanthropies, which were the first and the strongest. And I think the way that Chris opened here with talking about mayors, their leadership, we can talk here about everything, but we know, hey guys, without our mayor backing us up, without our mayors being there and insisting on values that are important for the poor ones, for the weak ones, things won't happen. So I think the mayor challenge is a brilliant challenge. In Israel, we didn't win that yet, but I'm sure we're going to try at least. But these foundations are putting focus on cities, and I do encourage us all to look them up. Of course, this was just a very, very fast run through Tel Aviv, just to give you a good taste to come and enjoy. And I assure you personally that I will be your host if you'll come to Tel Aviv. You've got here my email, and I'd love to host you. Well, that was fast, so I have enough time for my participants. I would love to invite to the stage Mr. Patrick Vincent. Patrick? Where are you? Oh, you're having your coffee. Okay, in a minute. Mr. Itai Dadon, which he's in Israeli, although his mission here is something else. We just met an hour ago, so don't take me wrong for that. Wolf, I don't want to mispronounce your name, so Mr. Wolfgang Glock is my third participant. All three, we just met an hour ago, but all three are brilliant and have their visions of how things in a smart city should look and should sound. I would like, can I move over there? Yes. Do we have a mic? There we go. So we'll take the next 36 minutes to introduce each one of our participants, and then we'll have questions, especially from the audience. So keep your questions for the last. But I do want to start with you, because I know your flight is at 6:30, and I'm like, you know, I'm intense for you. So please introduce yourself and give us your, how would I say, definition for smart cities.
Okay, so I'm Wolfgang Glock from the city of Munich, and I'm responsible for e-government and smart city somehow. And I'm a technical people and from the IT department. And so, yeah, what's a smart city? A smart city is a city I want to live in. And I'm with my activities, I try to make it much better and make it smarter, make the services useful for the people.
Presentation?
And my presentation, probably.
We're looking
After
for it.
my introduction of myself. Should I go there?
Should he go there? Okay,
Yeah.
So, no, but you can see it in here.
good.
And
Okay.
Is this?
So I will sit if it's okay with you. Yeah. So I want to go deeper. So you told about all these fascinating programs in Tel Aviv. I'm here from the yeah, my other job is I'm ICT cluster lead in the project Smarter Together. And that's an EU-funded project from the Horizon 2020 project. And we are working together with some colleagues here sitting from Vienna and from Lyon. And that's the lighthouse cities. And on the other hand, we have some follower cities. That's it's Venice, it's Sofia, and Santiago. And we have some observer cities in Kiev and Yokohama. This program is running for 5 years. Now we are rather in the middle of the program. The building phase is nearly finished. We have to complete our challenges in January next year. And then we have dissemination and monitoring on this project. And this is the upper league of this funding project. I think we get in total 25 million euro, so it's rather high. But if you look at the partners, 30 partners, then it will split on these partners, and then it would get somehow a little bit lower. But it's very interesting. We are an enthusiastic team, and we have a high motivation to build this smarter city. And that's a view on our pilot area. That's in the western part of Munich. And there you see, and it's a development area where currently space for 25,000 people are built up. Munich is growing by 30,000 people a year, so we have to hurry and start to build more flats and room for the people. It's a mix of new development and existing infrastructure, and so we have different ideas, and I want to show this innovation space we have in this project. To have some room, we have money, we have partners, and we have other cities to talk to, and we can exchange information and experiences. So there are 4 areas in this project. That's about mobility. We see all the stuff outside on the expo. We have energy, and then my part is integrated infrastructure and services. And in the end, we have all the challenge to cooperate with the citizens and have the citizen engagement as one central aspect to make more success in the project. Within this integrated infrastructure, that means in the end somehow the IT stuff. It's cross-functional, everywhere is IT inside. And so we have these different kind of innovations. We are building some pilot areas where we have a new lamppost installed. And this lamppost not only give light, they have some special inside. They have free Wi-Fi, and they have equipment for sensoring systems. And so we are putting all this information we collect with these sensors to a smart data platform. There we deal with various regulations or challenges according legal aspects, private data, public data. And if we match all this together, then we build services and we will provide it on a mobile platform. And that's our infrastructure we build within this project, and we want to give this as a space for innovation. And my example is here, these urban labs with the lampposts. That our major result in this area where we built this infrastructure. Okay, it's only 3 roads where we installed this special thing, and I have recognized that the guy beside me is in this is also in this area working on the biggest company in worldwide. But with street lights. So we are lampposts, the other ones are the street lights. And we have these 60 lampposts they installed, and fascinating was that there was an infrastructure built that we have some innovations in the administration as well. So we have all these silos in the administration, but when we started this project, various departments have to talk to each other. And that gets more and more close, and that's why I think we have some innovation space in the city as well, and we work all together to get this infrastructure. But the infrastructure is nice to have. On the other hand, you have to install solutions. And these solutions are not inside the city, but they have to be found out in the world. And we defined something, and at the beginning we thought we have something regular and legal, calling it open call, some innovation tender. But in the end, we found out that is not true. So we have some legal challenges to address. But in the end, we were rather successful. We identified solutions, and we dealt with the stuff of time and money. And we designed this special tender process, open call. We have the infrastructure as a framing condition for installing all this stuff on the lampposts. We have a limitation on the pilot project, and transparency is a very important thing when you do this kind of stuff. So tell everyone that you have this tender out on the market, and then you will be, or hopefully you will be safe.
Time,
Yep. But the learnings are, you should talk at first to the legal team. Do good documentation, limit the scope, so reduce the amount of money you need, and do marketing as much as possible. Go to the social channels and tell everyone, that you are doing this open call. These are the results. We did it twice. So we have solutions for detecting climate values, weather, pollution, and now we are installing parking management and traffic count and type of the cars or vehicles. And we have in every open call, we have 2 winners. So we can compare these solutions as well. So we have an innovation competition as well. And that's a map of Munich, where all different development areas are displayed, and we now share these ideas with these other projects, and hopefully this will get more innovation and good ideas to the smart city. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for standing in time, exactly, and sharing with us about the lamp stops. Lamp stops, is that the term? Lamp post, sorry. Itai, which is going to be our next speaker, is also going to share with us thoughts, but on different, how would I say? Sorry? Angle, different angle of the lights. I do want to share, he grabbed me before at the recess to look at their place, which was the e-tron company. I do encourage you to go and look at their booth. What I saw in both of you, and I do want to put it to your attention, is that you've got great infrastructure, no people on your presentation. So please, at the end of the day, we're all have to concentrate on our citizens. I think it's a new angle also that we have to focus on. Itai, it's yours.
Might be a different call, talk.
Exactly.
Good afternoon. I want to talk to you a little bit about what we do. We're going to talk about smart city from a different angle, from the angle of technology. But I think that what is so interesting is to walk around here and understand that all the vendors that provide technology and services and product in this market are driven by the same passion, the passion of really creating a new world that is a better place at the end of the world for the citizens that live in these communities. So it's technology with a purpose. It's not just technology for the sake of technology. And I think this is really, at the end of the day, why it would be great to have people also in those pictures, right? Because we're doing all this technology for someone and not just as a business. And really at i-tron, the one thing that defines us is the culture of our company. It's an energy company coming from the US, the United States, and we've been working on solving energy problems in the past almost 50 years and delivering solutions for almost 8,000 customers in over 100 countries and solving problems around energy, electricity, gas, water, and we feel amazing about it because we really make the best a world a better place, more resourceful, and a world that knows better how to manage their energy resources, the water. Coming from Israel, I'm super sensitive to water and how critical that is as a resource for everybody here. Do you know that we have cities that we work with in the United States where we save them 38% of water that used to be going to waste because of leaks in the infrastructure and other types of problems. And just by using our technology and our services and analytics or using the data, we are able to help them save that much water. We also got kind of dragged into the smart city from the energy sector because of the street lights. Just like the lamppost, what is incredibly interesting is that as technology advanced of LED, we used to convert all these technologies from hypersodium, for example, into LED to save energy, but then to connect these street lights to save even more energy and bring even more functionality for the benefit of the people. In Copenhagen, we helped the city save 60% of their energy budget just because of the technology we brought in. So that made us number one in streetlights today. Around the world, we have deployed over 3 million streetlights connected under our networks. And we also have the largest deployment in the world in Florida with over 500,000 streetlights in one network. I really have to accelerate. I'm taking way too much time. So what we do, we create networks in the cities that allow the cities to leverage that same infrastructure without having to invest again and again for every new application, meaning we acknowledge, we are the first one to say, we don't know what you can do with your technology. Probably even Steve Jobs, when he created the iPhone, didn't know that there will be all these applications. And today we've discovered these applications that you can see here on the slides. But what we tell the cities that we work with and the communities we work with, when tomorrow you will have another idea, you can still use that same infrastructure. And that's really what they're hearing and they're liking in our value proposition. We're in the beginning of this process of connecting things and no, I'm not showing you that. And we really don't know yet how valuable the data is going to be from what we're going to connect. And that humility is very important when we approach things, because technology, at the end of the day, if we don't acknowledge that we're just in the beginning of this transformation journey, when we worked with the city of New York on Wi-Fi solutions for bringing Wi-Fi to kids in poor neighborhoods, it was about education, right? It wasn't about Wi-Fi technology. Nobody cared. Right? No, we're talking about ecosystems and openness and sharing, right? This is the name of this room. Who remembers Nokia? Any finish around here? Good, good, good. We're old enough. Excellent. Amazing phones, BlackBerry, amazing phones, right? But what was the problem? They were amazing technology, but they decided to do everything on their own, right? They decided to keep all the technology internally and to create all the applications for their phones on themselves. By the time that they realized it was not a good idea, it was too late, because then came Steve Jobs and Andy Rubin from Google and created Android and iOS, and these guys were just out of business, right? The same thing can happen to any technology company that does not understand that smart cities is not a task that any single company in the world can take upon itself alone. It is impossible. It is really so vast and so much unknown that it's all about being open. So how do we do that? It starts really with working not only on standards, but interoperability. We created alliances such as the Wi-San Alliance that is trying to mimic what the Wi-Fi Alliance did for consumer electronics, right? The fact that all our devices can connect to this network here and in the city of Tel Aviv, it's thanks to the Wi-Fi alliance that created PlugFest, that's bringing every new Wi-Fi device to test. And when it passed the test, they get this nice sticker that we all recognize. The Wi-Sun alliance is imitating that activity to make sure that all the critical infrastructure, mesh, networking devices can interoperate. And we work with companies like Landis+Gyr and Cisco and other very large corporations that their business is connecting critical infrastructure around the world. I'll talk about a city that we're very proud about what we did with. It's the city of Glasgow. In 2014, the city of Glasgow won a tender with 24 million pounds. It was a lot of money, just like you said now. And what did they decide to do? They decided that from the design, they will have an open ecosystem, an open solution that will not depend on one vendor. And on purpose, they mandated that each one of these hexagons here will be provided, or pentagons, will be provided by a different supplier, and making sure that they all work together. And we provided a little bit of the street lighting and a little bit of the other things I'll show you. We provided these yellow dots are the street lights, and the blue dots, I believe, are the traffic counters in the video cameras, and we put also nose measurement sensors, and we made sure that all the data coming out from all these sensors is not only shared and open, but is modeled in a way that any other sensor that will come afterwards with the same functionality will behave exactly the same. And that is very important, because even though we were open, like we worked with all these companies with these nice logos on this slide, it was not enough. What was important is that the data that was generated came in a way that was understood by the city of Glasgow into an open data platform that then can be used, and still is used today, by startups around the world, taking that data and understanding what we can do with it. What is the correlation between noise in traffic and air quality, for example? This is another example of how our cameras can detect whether a parking spot is taken or not, the EV charging management, the ambulance and EMTs teams can make sure that the lights are turned on, and there's many other applications like that. I want to end with the little seconds that I have left, calling your attention on our new Smart City Challenge that we're doing with the city of Glasgow and the city of London. The cities came up with challenges, problems that are really important for them, and define them. And basically, we are now calling for developers to come up with solutions that will solve these problems. And we hope to see amazing solutions coming from the ecosystem, and that hopefully we'll be able to deploy eventually, not only in these cities, but around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Itai, and for giving us all this energy about these two actions. Now, with your examples, I would like to introduce Mr. Patrick Vincent, who is the Innovation Manager of Lyon, and will take us to his examples and to the way you see smart cities. Please.
Congratulations to have finished on time. You will get your flights both, so thank you. Hello everybody, thank you for the invitation. I am Patrick Vincent, Innovation Manager of Erasme, part of Lyon Metropole District, and aim to share with you some material about recent experimentations we make, the methodological experimentations about public-private open innovation process at the service of general interest. The definition of smart city could be that we should oblige that any project implicates collaboration first between private and public stakeholders. The second one, that every production should be published as commons on open source license. And the third one is that university and education should be implied, because they represent the future, and that any important decision should be sown in the perspective of prospectivity. So that would be my third points to add to the definition. About what I want to share with you today, would like to begin by the fact that Lyon Metropole conducts from a long time ago now broad and inclusive co-innovation animation with a lot hundred of public laboratories investing more hundred of millions on federal projects that make Lyon now one of the most attractive city in France. And among all those ecosystems, some actors play an historical and structural role in terms of stimulation, integration, experimentation with, at the same time, public and private stakeholders. The first one I am working in is the Urban Lab, where the public do tank from the administration and aim to develop, invent, experiment new uses of digital technologies for all public policies, from mobility going through smart city, well aging at home, or education purpose. Our idea is to conduct open innovation programs and research partnerships, and by this way interconnect and empower a lot of stakeholders inside the metropole and outside when they are private. And we want each time to prototype every idea quite quickly and to publish all the new services on open source license. That's why I was making this reference. And at the same time contribute to the transformation of the administration. Another great important organization is the Tuba, which is a non-profit living lab dealing with big companies they are financed by. And they are a kind of middle ground between those big companies, startups, and the local authority and the end users. They are specialized in open data, experimentation, at the same time, the capacity of evaluation on the field. If we take 2 minutes, there is problem of picture. If we take 2 minutes to look after a path of experimentation, a natural empirical path, it's very iterative, long, inclusive, and in other terms, it may work, but it's fragile process. And the example here is very emblematic because it concerns the iGeret, which is an interactive urban furniture, which has been invented by a young designer 12 years ago in our place. And afterwards, he has been doing some research and development, selling to Charvet Industry, which is exposing here the brevet, the license. And afterwards, Charvet did industrialization and is now signing contracts with Metropole to do a lot of use cases, investigation on the territory to find the best territorial governance for his product. And that lasted 12 years because it's very sequential. And if we want to go from a very linear to a cross-fertilization paradigm, we have to assume that we all share methodological challenges. What do I mean by that? Is that we have to begin by the fact that there is a correlation between internal transformation and external impact of all the services we produce. What do I mean? As an example, we have to impulse agility, experimentation, culture of confidence in our organization first, find more flexible economical model for prevention and all things like that. And actually, the transit from a management of infrastructures to the co-development of users will be possible. So we invented quite some very concrete open innovation processes financed by private companies, Alstom, Keolis, and animated by public stakeholders to enrich the ecosystem and initiate this first co-financed public-private open source partnership. How does it looks like? You have pluridisciplinary teams with mobility experts, designers, digital experts, and they dig into an open innovation sprints during 2 weeks. They eat and they sleep during this time, but they are engaged to the fact they will provide some concrete answers to the public challenges that has been exposed at the beginning. They begin with some collective inspiration with change makers to dig inside intermodality, comfort, social link to the territory. They put immersion quite quickly to be sure to answer to real needs on the territory, and they make some collective intelligence ideation to be able to be centered on the needs of end users, of course. Prototyping is probably the most important because he obliged to bring reality to ideas, and it's what all our organizations need to have more iterative and short times paradigm that enables not to think on 3 years because the world will completely has changed in 3 years, definitely. And some examples of what is going out from those processes. Sailing display in the rolling stock, bus or trams or subways, is able to interact with the outside or with the travelers that use the maintenance bars and can display the flow information, cultural informations, meteorological informations, or imagine an ecosystemical new way of interacting in the rolling stock. And Alstom is now working about the version 2 of this experimentation. I am the boss, which is very disruptive. It's a chatbot that the traveler uses, and he dialogues with the personified bus, which asks him what he's doing now, what he likes in the city center, and the bus will share those information to other travelers afterwards. That's only 2 examples. I just would like to conclude on this cryptical slide. Very shortly to say that next step in Lyon is to build an intelligence of urban worlds and to incarnate in only one place stakeholders like Public Policy do Think, Corporate Living Lab, University, to be able to bridge ecosystems, upper ground ecosystem, corporate innovators, industries, with the underground ecosystem, the creative industries we have been talking 1 hour ago here. And I think it's important, and we do need this kind of places to conduct really general interest programs in our territory. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for wrapping up just on time. Thank you, Itai. Thank you, Glock. But before I thank everyone, I do want to be consistent and listen to you guys. I would love to share your questions to the panel or to me, anyone that is a urbanist and is a city. What is our question? Let's see. What impact do experimental smart city programs usually have in cities? How could they be improved? Anonymous. Anyone would want to pick that up? Yeah, Itai.
I think that there is, again, coming back from the private sector, the way we see it is that we definitely understand the need to not only assess the technology, but understand the business case, understand the impact. And therefore, before we try it, we really don't know. And it's going to be different from one city to the other because there are not 2 cities that are the same. That's the first point. The second point is that what we ask in return from the cities is to tell us what they're trying to achieve. What is your objective? What are you looking for? What would be a success in your mind after this trial? And if we know that in advance, we can gear towards a successful trial and towards gearing the technology again to have its purpose, to fulfill its purpose and be successful in the technology. And therefore, it means that we have to limit the duration of the time of that trial as well.
So, do you want to share that also?
Maybe, yeah. From my point of view, these projects are the starting point for the discussions within the city. So it's only the beginning. All these departments work together, they are discussing, and they are looking forward to identify more innovations and more space for building a better city. So this discussion is initiated by these projects.
Just another question, because another anonymous asked, where do we consider that a system is innovative? Patrick, when do we consider that a system is innovative?
Thank you for this simple question.
You can pass, or you can answer about whatever you want. This is a smart city, you know, and you're a smart person, so go for it.
I mean, the important points I was speaking in introduction is to be able to make real perspective on what our law signals know and what will be the cities or will need the cities in some years, 5, 6 years. I was speaking about university. They are able to analyze that, and if we are not able to take a very low rentable subject in consideration now, like ecological responsibility, social inequalities. We are probably doing a lot of quite useful things for the short term, but in long terms consideration we want. So my answer would be to be able to have a long-term considerations with the specialized actor. We have a lot of talents on the territory that are able to analyze all those long-term future considerations.
Thank you for that. So as you see, Patrick is very serious. He has a work plan and he thinks long-term. I would want to match up with you and just have fun in our cities. Cities are a playground. We should enjoy them. We should go and they should feed our curiosity. Each one of us has its own role as a city maker to make our city better for ourselves and for our citizens. So just I encourage you to go enjoy Barcelona if you're not from here, because it's a wonderful city. Every year I come here again. And to enjoy any other city, of course, I'm inviting you over to Tel Aviv to be my personal guests, and I'll be your personal host to enjoy and see how Tel Aviv is fun. Thank you very much for your time. Chris, thank you so much for bringing me up, and it's your time to wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you, Hila. Well, we've learned so much today. Thank you to the panelists for all these concrete ideas that we can take back home and put to use in our cities. I'm just going to sort of pull out a couple of threads that I thought were interesting in each of the talks. From Michelle, we heard about the 63 ways, very specific number of ways that we can innovate, and also that often the most simple ideas can be the most powerful and transformative. From Sergio, we had the reminder that great ideas are nothing without workers, and that to put them into action, and that there's a way we can celebrate risk-taking while protecting the risk-takers. Hila, collaboration means don't say no. I think that's always a useful reminder that you can't collaborate if you have your defenses up, and the best ideas come from citizens. Wolfgang, you told us that solutions aren't always inside the city. You must find them out in the world. And with those 2 open calls for solutions and awarding 2 separate contracts to compare the ideas, that sounded like a very interesting idea that we could all take something from. Itai, we talked about closed providers can't keep up. That's very interesting. Smart cities is not a task that any one company can take on its own. So keeping these ecosystems open so that everybody can the open technology and open standards is really in everybody's interest. And Patrick, I love innovation is a collaborative and uncertain process, and prototyping can help to make ideas real quickly and to get feedback quickly. So all these are very real things we can take back home and put to work in our cities. So thank you so much for joining us today, the last session. There is actually one more session in the auditorium that you should go to, but please have a safe travels home, and thank you so much.